Hi guys, I was so pleased about how much you enjoyed my last English literature video. So today I'm here to do another one, a tips and tricks to pass your A-level English exam. I've just finished my AS year and I got an A overall, which I was so happy about. Never really expected it, to be honest, but I got an A. I was so pleased with that. So I'd like to share my advice with you on how to pass, if not get a good mark. My first tip may seem like a very obvious one, but it is very surprising how many people go into English literature not expecting to read that much. And my first tip is to read the books. I know so many people who went the whole year without reading the text, and that panics me a little bit because the first thing I did as soon as I started the course, as soon as I knew what the text would be, was to read them. So I actually read mine a few weeks before I started, but I would say that if you have your set text, you know what they are for the year ahead, try and read them ahead of time. So if you've got to read them in 2 months, read them in a month. If you're going to read them in 4 weeks, try and read them in 2 weeks if you can. I know that's not going to be possible for everyone, but if you read them as soon as you possibly can, if you try and read them quickly, it means you have so much more time to analyse them, to know the text, to get to know it, to, if you need to, read it again, because you are probably going to have to read the books twice throughout the year. I read The Great Gatsby in August, just before I started in September. I read extracts of it as we were studying it throughout, but I already knew the text. So whilst everyone was reading it for the first time in the year, I'd already read it. So I was reading it that second time. And then before the exam, I read it for a third time. With Tessa the D'Urbervilles, however, which was my other text, I only read it once, but I went through it again throughout the year. So it makes it so much easier if you can beat your deadlines. So set your own deadline to read it, but please read the text. You can't just rely on watching an adaptation. The adaptation of Tessa D'Urbervilles is good, but it's not completely the same as the book, and you miss out on so much of the subtext. You miss out on so many of the motifs and the themes, because when you're watching an adaptation, they have to cram it into a certain amount of time, whereas in the book, it has everything you're going to need to study it. So that is my first tip. Read the book. If you're watching this and think you're just going to get through the year without reading the text, then please sort yourself out, because it's just not going to work. Another tip I have is quite ambiguous. It is just find a system that works for you. So for my first year, I didn't annotate my text. Here is my copy of Othello. It's pretty much completely clean. I didn't do anything with it. I wrote all my notes on separate pieces of paper, and I have a folder of all my notes throughout the year. So I have them to look back on for revision next summer when I come to revise Othello again. So I didn't annotate my books. I tried to in tests, but it didn't really work out, and it wasn't detailed. It was just underlining it. But I know that some people in my class did choose to annotate their text. They had whole pages full of notes where you couldn't even read the text because there were so many of their own notes. But that did not work for me. I just preferred to write it out by hand and just write key quotations down. I would go through on the themes and characters and write down chapter by chapter those quotes as we went through it in class. But this year I have the non-exam assessment, or in normal terms coursework, but they don't like to call it that now, and I am studying The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, and I've used lots of sticky notes. These are just ones that I got from W.H. Smith. I've also got cue cards with some notes on there stuck in on the pages where I think they'll come in handy, because I've got a lot to do on comparison with another text, so I've got to read that as I go too. So there are lots of things in here that I thought would link with the theme that I'm going to do, which I don't want to discuss because I haven't fully finalised it yet. But once I've handed it in, I will discuss how I went through doing my coursework. So I have done that this time. I haven't written in it. I hate writing in my books. If I have to do it, I will, but I just don't like it because I know that if I pick it up again, my thoughts may have changed. But do find a system that works for you. If you're doing something and your friends are not doing the same thing, don't worry about that, because there's not one way that you can approach a book. You can go in thinking that you're gonna annotate it like this, and then in the end you might not at all, like I did. So do find a system that works for you, whether that's sticky notes, post-its, just cue cards, or you might want to write out your notes in a different way. And something that is particularly great about A-levels, and I have found at college, is that I've had time throughout the year to figure out a way that I want to work. So at GCSE it was very much, you're going to do this, you're going to revise in this way. But at college, I don't know if it's going to be the same for sixth form, but at college I have been able to find a system that works for me and revise in a way that works for me because I've had the freedom to do so. So that was something that I really enjoyed. I think most specifications study a Shakespeare text, and I don't get the text in the exam, so I have to know quotations from Othello. And something that I found amazing as I was revising was Spotify, something that you might not think is likely, but I found the play on Spotify so I could listen to it when I was out and about, on the bus, on the train, and I could listen to Othello. So I have the whole thing, here it is. That is a bit of a shock noise when I'm just listening to music and that comes on. But it's by the Marlowe Dramatic Society and Professional Players, and they have a lot of different Shakespeare plays on there. It's not just Othello, I think they have a wide range of other plays on there that you can listen to. You can also listen on YouTube to stuff. There are extracts on there which I looked at and watched, because when you're reading a play, it is all about finding out how you can analyse it in the context of somebody watching it. So the different way I approached Othello was, as I was analysing it, to imagine that I was the audience and that was what I was seeing. So what in, for example, Othello, when you hear Emilia and Desdemona talking, what are you watching? Well, it's one of the only scenes in the play where there are two female characters just having a chat. So as you're watching that, that's quite a different thing. But for a Shakespearean audience, that would be two men playing as two women, having a conversation as two women, but they're actually men. And that adds a certain irony to it as well. That is a good thing to listen to it or to watch it. If you can't see a performance, then you can always listen to it. And I am going to try next year listening to an audiobook. And audiobooks of classics are really good because you can go on the podcast app and you can type in pretty much anything. So let's have a look. I'm going to type in Tess of the D'Urbervilles. Because they are copyright free, you can just type in Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy. Here are all the chapters.
On an evening in the latter part of May.
There we go. There was a bit from the Tess of the D'Urbervilles audiobook, and there are lots of different ones. I think the best one is LibriVox, which have so many books. I know they have Jane Eyre, they probably have hundreds of others. I found theirs are the best because they are very used to doing it. So find a voice that works for you, because that's a really annoying thing as well if you find a voice and you have to listen to it and you just don't like it. So find something that works for you, find a particular style you like, but I found that was a really good way to revise and get the quotations in my head. A lot of you have been asking about particular combinations. Should you study English literature if you're studying X, Y and Z? I would say that English literature is quite a versatile course, so you can study it with anything. As long as you're dedicated to it, as long as you spend time at the start of the year reading the text, it really doesn't matter. I found that throughout the year I wasn't doing that much revision. I do creative writing and that doesn't involve any revision, so other than that, my sociology was a lot more revision than my English was, so all I had to do was reread the text and read over my notes. There's not anything that you need to learn, and ask for help if you don't understand anything. If you don't understand a particular term, just ask your teacher for help, because that's what they are there for. Use their time. Another tip that I have for English literature is quite a difficult one, something that I struggled with at the start of the year, and that is that you aren't going to get a good grade straight away. I was working at like a D, C, then it slowly crept up to a B, and I was steadily working at a B all year and I just could not get it up. I was getting an A on odd essays and then it would drop down again, and at one point it was like an A, and then for another unit it was a D, and it was so frustrating. But it does take quite a lot of time to bump up your grade, because as you get more essays back, as you figure out how your writing works within the limits of the exam, as you do all that, you'll find that your grade by the end of the year will go up steadily. I was expecting that I might get a C if I was lucky in the exam, but then when I got my piece of paper and it said an A, I was shocked, because it's just one of those things that depends on the questions. So don't beat yourself up if you're not doing well straight away. It depends on what you get at GCSE, and people say it's a massive step up from GCSE, but I honestly don't think so, because English literature isn't one of those things. You might be studying a harder text, but if you enjoy the text, if you enjoy that process of breaking it down and figuring out the basics of that book and how the author works, then you're going to be fine. Honestly, English literature isn't anything to worry about, I don't think. I wouldn't say it's a huge step up from GCSE in terms of what you're expected to do. There are more texts to study, but I think that makes it more interesting from my perspective, and the unseens are really nice to do as well, because you're studying lots of different texts. I love it. I think it's a great course to study and I would highly recommend it. I would say just don't worry about it. If you get a bad grade at first, that is completely normal, and that's normal for most of A-level courses too. In terms of a step up, for me it was just finding that way that worked for me, finding something that would make me want to revise and would want to learn. And once I'd figured out that system, it was fine and I knew what I needed to do by the end of the year. So set yourself goals throughout. Say, this time I'm going to try and get a C, and then in 2 essays time I'm going to try and get that up to a B. And ask why you're not getting those grades. If you want to get a higher grade, ask what you can do to get it up there. So this is another reminder to read your text if you're not planning on doing so, because that is the most important thing. Ask for help, read your text. That's pretty much all you need to know. I am, however, going to be doing an English literature specific Q&A video answering all your questions about English literature and whatever you want to know about it, because there are things I've talked about here that you might be wanting further answers to, or something you have in your mind. I am here to answer all your worries, to set your mind at ease, because I was nervous at the start of the year and now I've done a year and I feel quite confident going into the next year of English literature. And obviously I'm going to be doing videos throughout the year as well, as I figure out new things, as I read my text, as I get to the end of the year and get the next set of exams. I'm going to be doing lots of videos about English literature because it's something that I don't think enough is there to offer advice on YouTube. I had hardly seen any videos when I started and it would have been a great satisfaction to me to watch them. So if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Remember to read your text please, and I will see you guys soon. Happy reading!